You open the fridge. You stare at it for a second. Nothing looks good. So you close it and order something instead. This happens almost every day. It feels like a modern problem. It isn't. Your ancestors faced a version of this same moment, but the stakes were not boredom. The stakes were survival. And what they actually ate is stranger, messier, and far more resourceful than anything you learned from a diet trend. Forget the caveman eating a mammoth-leg image. That picture is mostly wrong. For most of human history, meat was not the main event. It was a bonus. A lucky day. Something you celebrated because it almost never happened on command. So what filled the other 360 days a year? Plants, roots, bugs, bone marrow. Things you would not put in your mouth without flinching. Let's go back. Not a few hundred years. 2 million years. Before farming, before pottery, before anyone had a name for diet. Your ancestors were opportunistic eaters, which is a polite way of saying they ate whatever did not run away fast enough or kill them first. Anthropologist Catherine Milton spent years studying the diets of wild primates and early human ancestors, and her research pointed to something surprising. Diet flexibility, not meat, was the real engine of human evolution. Early hominins were not specialists. They were generalists. They could eat fruit one season and dig up starchy tubers the next. That flexibility is likely why your ancestors survived ice ages, droughts, and famines that wiped out more specialized species. Here's the part that surprises people. Roots and tubers, the underground, unglamorous parts of plants, were probably one of the most important food sources our ancestors relied on. Digging sticks predate stone spearheads by a wide margin. Before anyone was chasing an antelope, someone was on their knees, digging into dirt with a sharpened branch, looking for something with enough calories to get through the week. Think about that for a second. The most important tool in early human survival might not have been a weapon. It might have been a shovel. And once you had that root, that tuber, that starchy lump of buried plant matter, you had a problem. Raw tubers are hard to digest. They're often bitter, sometimes toxic, and they take enormous energy to chew and break down. So what changed everything? Fire. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham built an entire theory around this moment, arguing that cooking may be the single most transformative event in human evolutionary history. His research suggests that cooked food unlocks far more calories than raw food. The same root, cooked instead of raw, could deliver a dramatically larger energy return for a fraction of the chewing effort. Multiply that gain across millions of meals, over hundreds of thousands of years, and you start to see something remarkable. Fire did not just keep your ancestors warm at night. It may have helped fuel the growth of the human brain itself, an organ that consumes an enormous share of the body's daily energy even while resting. You are, in a very real sense, reading this sentence because someone, a very long time ago, figured out how to make a root taste less like dirt. But cooking came later. Long before controlled fire, your ancestors were already surviving on foods that would make most people today gag. Termites, grubs, insect larvae pulled from rotting logs. These were not fringe snacks. In many hunter-gatherer societies studied by anthropologists, insects made up a meaningful, reliable portion of daily protein. They didn't run. They didn't fight back. And they were often available exactly when other food sources were scarce. There's also the marrow. When a scavenged carcass had already been stripped of meat by larger predators, early humans weren't necessarily walking away empty-handed. The long bones still held something valuable inside. Cracking one open with a rock could reveal fat and marrow, a dense calorie-rich resource that predators without tools couldn't easily access. Some researchers argue this scavenging niche, not active big-game hunting, may have been one of the earliest and most consistent meat-related food sources for early hominins. Here's where it gets stranger. Researcher Amanda Henry examined ancient dental plaque, the calcified buildup preserved on fossilized teeth, and found microscopic starch granules trapped inside. That evidence suggested that Neanderthals, long stereotyped as pure carnivores obsessed with mammoth meat, were also eating cooked grains, roots, and other starchy plants. The rugged meat-only caveman image doesn't hold up. Even one of our closest evolutionary cousins was eating something closer to a hearty stew, than a slab of raw flesh. Think about what that means for the picture you've carried around in your head your whole life. Documentaries love the hunt. Museums build entire dioramas around a group of men surrounding a woolly mammoth with spears raised. It's dramatic, it's cinematic, it sells tickets, but the plaque on a Neanderthal's fossilized teeth doesn't lie, and it doesn't care about drama. It just records what actually went into that mouth, meal after meal, for years. And what it recorded looks a lot less like an action movie, and a lot more like a slow-cooked grain stew. There's another piece of this story that rarely makes it into the popular version: seasonality. Your ancestors didn't eat the same thing in January that they ate in July. In colder months, when plants died back and roots became harder to find beneath frozen ground, animal fat and marrow became far more critical, sometimes the difference between surviving winter and not. In warmer months, when berries ripened and tubers swelled underground, plant foods dominated the diet again. This wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was a forced, seasonal negotiation with an unpredictable environment, repeated every single year, for hundreds of thousands of years. That negotiation shaped more than just what went into their stomachs. It shaped how their bodies processed food at a genetic level. Populations that relied heavily on starchy roots and tubers over many generations developed extra copies of a gene involved in breaking down starch in saliva. More copies meant more efficient digestion of exactly the food that kept showing up on the menu. Your genome right now still carries the fingerprints of what your distant ancestors were forced to eat to survive a bad winter 50,000 years ago. There's also the question of who was doing the finding. For decades, the popular story centered almost entirely on male hunters chasing large game. But looking closely at surviving hunter-gatherer societies studied by anthropologists, gathering, not hunting, often provided the majority of daily calories. And gathering was frequently done by women who carried an intimate, detailed knowledge of which roots were edible, which berries were poisonous, which insects were safe, and where to find all of it across changing seasons. That knowledge was not simple. It took years to learn and a lifetime to master. In many ways, it may have been just as critical to survival as any spear. So why does the myth persist? Why do we picture a spear, a fire, and a mammoth carcass instead of a woman digging for tubers or a group cracking open termite mounds? Because meat is dramatic. A hunt makes a good story. Digging in the dirt for 20 minutes to find a starchy root does not. But drama is not the same as accuracy. And the accurate picture is this: your ancestors were not apex predators feasting nightly. They were resourceful generalists, piecing together survival from dozens of unglamorous sources, most of which came from the ground, not from the chase. Now think about your own relationship with food today. You live in a world engineered to solve the exact problem your ancestors spent their entire lives solving. Calories, once scarce and hard-won, are now available at every gas station, on every corner, through an app on your phone. Your brain has not caught up. It still treats sugar and fat as rare and valuable, because for nearly your entire evolutionary history, they were. That craving you feel for something sweet after a stressful day? That's not weakness. That's a 2-million-year-old survival algorithm still running exactly as designed, just in an environment it was never built for. Consider fat too. You've probably heard fat treated like an enemy at some point in your life, but to your ancestors, fat was gold. It was the most calorie-dense substance available in the natural world, and finding it was rare enough that the body evolved to crave it intensely the moment it appeared. That same craving hasn't gone anywhere. It's just aimed now at a drive-through window instead of a cracked open bone. And salt? Salt was so scarce for so long in human history that entire trade routes were eventually built around it. Your ancestors rarely had access to more salt than their bodies strictly needed. Your taste buds still light up at the first bite of something salty, not because you're undisciplined, but because your biology has no memory of a world where salt was ever easy to find. There's one more craving worth mentioning, one you might not expect: bitterness aversion. Many wild plants, especially unripe or unfamiliar ones, contain bitter compounds that signal toxicity. Your ancestors who avoided bitter, unknown plants were more likely to survive long enough to reproduce. That's why, even now, children instinctively recoil from bitter vegetables long before anyone teaches them to. It isn't pickiness, it's an ancient warning system, still switched on, still doing its job in a world where almost nothing on the shelf is actually going to poison you. Your ancestors did not eat clean, structured, 3 meals-a-day diets. They ate what the season offered. Some days were feast. Many more were scarcity. Their bodies evolved to handle both, to store fat efficiently when food was plentiful, and to endure long stretches when it wasn't. That evolutionary rhythm of feast and famine is still written into your biology, even though you now live in a world of permanent feast. So the next time you stand in front of an overstocked fridge, feeling strangely unsatisfied by an abundance your ancestors could not have imagined, remember what they actually ate. Not mammoth steaks around a fire every night. Roots pulled from dirt with a sharpened stick. Termites from a rotting log. Marrow cracked from a leftover bone. A grain here, a tuber there. Endless small, resourceful decisions that added up to survival. You open the fridge again. This time, you see it differently. Not as a failure of choice, but as the strange, almost unbelievable endpoint of 2 million years spent digging, foraging, and figuring out how to get just a little more energy out of the world than the day before. Your ancestors would not recognize the abundance in front of you, but somewhere in your instincts, in that flicker of craving before you close the door, they are still there.